So I normally deal in a lot of cheaper bike parts, but what can a Chinese brand that normally focuses on value deliver when they've got a slightly bigger budget to play with? Well, today we're going to find out. My name, as always, is Luke, and welcome back to Trace Velo. So this brand, OG-EVKIN, they make some really good value carbon bike frames out of China, and I've had a few of them in the past. This one right here, this one, and also this one. I've done thousands of miles on all those bike frames and they've been great, but today I've got something a bit different. Inside this box is a more premium carbon bike frame, where my other ones from this company cost anything from around 400 to 650 quid. The one inside here is 1,200 bucks or just over 950 quid. So what have OG-EVKIN done with that extra cash? Well, let's find out. And full disclosure, this isn't a paid review, but I was sent that frame for free. Now, I have anonymously bought 2 frames from this company in the past, and I really liked them, hence why I kind of accepted the one down there. But yeah, for the cynics among you, caveats all round, I suppose. Anyway, enough of that, let's crack on. Right then, so all of my previous frames from this company have been sort of an endurance style. So good all-round frames, relaxed geometry with a bit of compliance built in for longer days in the saddle. This is their new Loong frame. It's apparently stiffer and faster with a focus on Aero over endurance. So more of a race bike, if you see what I mean. This is apparently a new shipping box design for this frame, and it's packed really well, so that's great to see. Plus, it's all recyclable, which is pretty cool. But anyway, let's get all this out and kind of see what we're dealing with here. Okay, so I've literally just kind of unpacked everything, and I'll show you the frame and stuff in a second because this legitimately looks really, really nice. But I've got to show you the accessories because I had a quick look at some of the stuff you get, and it's genuinely really, really nice quality. So you get the usual stuff, like inside here, you've got the headset bearings along with the compression plug for the headset, and then you've got these spacers which are required for the integrated cable routing that this frame requires, so that's great to see. These integrated bars might look familiar, so these come with the frame, and this set of Turbo X handlebars from OG-EVKIN. These also get included on the Qonqi frame that I built up in the last episode there, so those might look familiar. And also there's this nice, it's a carbon top cap, which goes on the top there to preload the headset bearings, and once that's all together, that looks really sleek. But the other stuff you get, really cool. In here you get a carbon Garmin and GoPro mount, which is cool, and it gets slung underneath the bars via those 2 bolts there. This is the saddle clamp. So for starters, it's a 2-bolt system, which is really good, so it's gonna be nice and secure. But interestingly, the bottom piece here, so that curvature goes on top of the seat post there, like so. This is made of carbon, which is really cool. Normally, these are made of aluminium to save a bit of weight, save a bit of cost, sorry. But the fact it's made of carbon, really, really nice. And the seat post here, it's a kind of slightly aero profile because of that curvature on the top there. They include a Di2 battery shim, so that's really, really good to see. Normally these aren't included. But this is the cool bit, right? From what I can see, all of the bolts on this frame, so you've got the bolt there for the compression plug, you've got 2 bolts there to clamp onto the steerer tube, those 2 for the Garmin mount, these 2 here for the saddle clamp, and even all 4 of these bottle cage bolts. I believe they're made of titanium alloy. So this is a little shard from a neodymium magnet. I actually got this out of it's from an old hard drive, actually. And if I show you, sticks to that steel pipe from my work stand, absolutely no problem. But titanium and most titanium alloys are pretty much non-magnetic, so doesn't stick to those. And I've tested it on all 4 of these bottle cage bolts, doesn't stick to those either. Now, aluminium is also non-magnetic. This is definitely aluminium, this piece here, it doesn't stick to that. But from experience, these definitely kind of feel and sound like a titanium alloy. So yeah, I'm pretty confident they are. And I don't know, just kind of bonkers to see that level of care and detail taken on a frame like this, which is a more value-oriented one. Even though it is slightly more premium than their usual stuff, it is still on the value end of the spectrum. And to have all of the bolts made from titanium alloy, yeah, crazy. So the detail and the kind of care taken on all these accessories, really, really cool. Okay, so here it is put together in the stand, and it looks really, really cool. So OG-EVKIN were kind enough to sort me out with a custom livery. So it's got my signature pink and green colors there, and we've got OG-EVKIN feet Trace Velo, which is really, really cool. Although I have noticed something. So you can get it in a kind of marble effect orange and this really cool looking marble effect purple color, along with a black as well. And I think at some point they might also sell this Trace Velo color, which would be cool. But this is the design I sent across to them when I was kind of figuring out how I wanted this to look. And you can see all the stripes go pink on top, green on the bottom. But unfortunately, that set of stripes there and that set of stripes there are the wrong way up. So they've got green on top, pink on the bottom rather than the other way around, which is a bit of a shame. But like I said, this is a completely one-off custom livery at the moment, so I'll definitely give them a break. I assume if they come to actually sell this color, that they'll fix that, but still, it does look really, really cool. And the paint job is really well done. So all of the decals are really well applied underneath the clear coat. And also, I'll show you, there's a bit of metallic flake in the black. So yeah, a bit of sparkle in the black paint there. When the sun hits this outside, it is gonna look pretty special. But yeah, a little bit unfortunate that those two sets of stripes are the wrong way up. But the paint job otherwise is absolutely flawless, not a scratch on it, and I still think it looks wicked. But where did the extra money go on this frame? Well, let me show you some bits. Now, there is the old adage that you can't see Aero, which is, sort of fair enough. You can't fully understand the Aero characteristics of a frame like this unless you do wind tunnel testing. But that aside, they have added some nice Aero characteristics and profiling to this frame. So up at the front here, they've added these two little winglets to the bottom of the head tube there, which match up quite nicely to the shape of the top of the fork there. So that transition from fork to frame is nice and smooth as a result. And they've profiled the head tube slightly, not massively, but it is wider at the bottom and the top than it is in the middle. So they've kind of cinched in that head tube shape to reduce frontal area. And finally, on the down tube here, it goes from kind of boxy section, and it's quite difficult to demonstrate on a gloss black frame, but it gets kind of narrower there. Can you see that transition? So it goes from wide to narrow up at the front. Again, you can't see Aero, but I would assume all of this helps smooth the airflow at the front. Now, this is quite a cool feature. So on a lot of modern Aero road bikes, they've started to do this and kind of recess the through axle at the front. And OG-EVKIN have followed suit. So you can see they've recessed the through axle ever so slightly into the carbon. But what a lot of other manufacturers have done is where the through axle threads into the fork on the other side, they usually embed a piece of aluminium directly into the carbon. So it's kind of molded in there, and then it's flush on the other side. So it's flush and the paint goes all the way down to the bottom. It's the way it's done on the new Canyon Air Road and the new Windspace, I believe. The issue is that if you ever mess up the threads on the insert right here, you'll need to replace the whole fork because it'll be completely knackered. OG-EVKIN have done this quite cool thing actually. So it seems to work in a very similar fashion to kind of the rear derailleur hanger. So if that snaps or gets bent, you can pull that out and put a new one in. Same here. So you can undo that screw, pull out the insert and put a new one in. So I haven't seen that before, but a really cool feature. The rear half of the bike has that very traditional kind of Aero profiling to the shape, I suppose. You've got that circumference right here designed to hug the rear wheel to kind of reduce drag, and it's difficult to kind of get it across on camera, but they're very, very chunky tubing. So down tube, very chunky, nice chunky top tube there. These chain stays, they're so deep and really quite thick as well, along with these seat stays. These aren't flimsy in the slightest. And if I show you, it's got an asymmetric shape to the BB cup to kind of presumably to increase stiffness. So yeah, just everything about this frame screams stiff and fast. Again, I'll have to build it up to test it, but it certainly looks the part. As we're talking bottom brackets, this seems to be a really good example. So both sides of it have been faced. So you can see it's been faced there, and same on the other side. We've got bare metal there. Plus the threads seem really nice. No overspray in the threads, which is great. So that's a good example. And this is a T47 bottom bracket. I probably prefer a BSA, but this standard is growing on me. T47 generally comes in a little bit heavier than the equivalent BSA threaded bottom bracket, because basically the bottom bracket cups and the bearings themselves are chunkier with T47, but it does mean that you can much more easily support SRAM dub cranksets or even 30mm FSA cranksets with T47. So carries a little bit of a weight penalty, but you get chunkier bearings, so bearing life is a little bit better, and it's a threaded bottom bracket. So bottom brackets are cheap and it's easy to service. So T47, a really good choice for this bike. So at least externally, a very tidy looking frame. Everything is beautifully finished, which is really, really good. But let's have a look inside the frame. Right, so the big headline here is that this frame uses EPS molding for the entire thing. So traditionally, carbon sheets pre-impregnated with resin, often just called pre-preg, are laid into a mold, and as they cure, an inflatable bladder is used to push that carbon into the form of the mold. Once cured, the bladder is removed, and you'll often find wrinkles and potentially uneven distribution or even pooling of resin using this older technique. With EPS molding, the carbon is laid over an expanded polystyrene form of the frame. Then when laid into a mold and heated, the polystyrene expands, evenly pushing the carbon into the shape of that mold. It's a more expensive process, but wall thicknesses are much more consistent. You can easily tune the carbon layup, and you get very smooth inner walls with little to no wrinkles in the carbon. So it's generally accepted that frames made using EPS molding are consistently better quality and usually come out a little bit lighter as well. And this frame is no exception. Easily the cleanest one I have ever seen on the inside. Absolutely zero wrinkles anywhere, even in the tight curves and corners of the headset and bottom bracket area. Really clean. It's very smooth, so it should be nice and strong and stiff throughout. But let's weigh this thing quickly. So size-wise, it's a large frame, and just the frame itself comes in at 1,055 grams, which isn't too bad actually. So for comparison, the new Canyon Aero is 960 grams for a medium frame, so a large will be around the same weight, maybe slightly under. And the new Cervelo S5 comes in at 1,018 grams for a 54 centimeter frame. So it's maybe a touch heavier than the competition, but only by a handful of grams. For a more aero-focused frame, it's definitely in the ballpark for sure. Right then, so where has the extra money gone on this frame? Well, undoubtedly the majority has gone into that EPS construction method. It's more costly than using traditional air bladders, requires more expertise and very different kind of tooling in its production as well. And another thing to point out, some manufacturers will use EPS techniques for certain parts of the frame, like bottom bracket or head tube, and then these pre-molded sections are put into the mold, and the rest of the frame and the layup is done via traditional methods with air bladders and stuff to save a little bit on cost. Not the case here. This whole thing is done via EPS, hence the incredibly consistent and kind of a clean frame construction. So great overall construction, a decent weight for an aero frame like this as well. Nice bottom bracket area faced on both sides, despite the kind of mismatched stripes. Still a really nice paint job on this thing. Nice little touches like that insert on the front forks for the throw axle, and really top-notch accessories. But I did spot one issue with this frame. Initially, the fitment for the top headset bearing was pretty tight actually, and I felt like it wasn't seated all the way down. Hopefully you can see that here. There's a bit of a gap underneath the bearing. It turns out there was some clear coat overspray inside that bearing cup. So you can see here, I just ran a hobby knife around the inside edge, and yeah, definitely looks like clear coat. It came off very easily and no carbon came with it or anything like that. Presumably they just forgot to mask that area off properly when they did the last step of kind of clear coating the frame while painting it. Honestly, I don't think it's a massive deal myself. It was pretty easy to spot and very easy to rectify, but I gotta be honest with you, it was an issue with this frame. You have got to remember though, that while this is, you know, slightly more premium than the stuff that OG-EVKIN normally does, it's still pretty cheap for a frame of this caliber. But look, there's only so much you can tell about a frame when it's just sat in the stand. You've got to build the bike and ride the thing. So with that in mind, I have some really cool parts to throw on this frame. So this bike that I've got down here out of shot, it's the bike I built up in the last episode. Really enjoying using it actually. Again, it's an OG-EVKIN frame, but the whole build, the principle was to do it as kind of cheap as possible. So the whole thing, pedals and all, was 1,500 quid, so bonkers value. I'm gonna take a different tact with this one. So it's still gonna be towards the value end of the spectrum, but I'm gonna use some slightly more name brand parts. So Farsports wheels, I've got a Magine power meter and an electronic group set from L2 as well to go on this thing. So yeah, that's gonna be wicked. Stay tuned for that. Should make quite good comparisons between the two. So yeah, subscribe if you like this kind of thing. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and yeah, wish me luck for 2025. Right, see you next time. Ciao.
It's the bonus clip time.
Okay, right, so I'm gonna stick this on the end, and it's a bit weird, and most of you probably don't care, but I'm gonna tell you my New Year's resolutions, because I kind of wanna hold myself accountable in some way to getting them done, because they're so simple, and they would make a big difference. So number one, and it's gonna sound so stupid, there's only two of them. The first one is I need to eat lunch. And it sounds so ridiculous, right? But normally what I'll do is I'll get up, have a coffee, and then about 11 o'clock, I'll have a bit of breakfast, like a slice of toast or something, maybe some eggs. And then I just won't eat anything properly till about 4 p.m. just because I'm rushing around doing bits and bobs, and I'll have sort of snacks in between, but nothing substantial. Then by 4 o'clock, my blood sugar is just like crashed, and I feel terrible. And then especially if I like want to go out in the evenings for a bike ride around that time, maybe before I pick my daughter up from nursery or something, I can't because I've got nothing in the tank, and it's just So stupid. So I'm gonna try and really eat lunch consistently at about 1 o'clock, something like that. So that's number one. Number two, again, so simple, but I never do it. I need to start stretching. So I have never been able to touch my toes. I don't know. In my whole adult life, I've never been able to do it. And especially because I cycle all the time, my hamstrings are really tight. So I'm gonna try and do Pilates every evening and stretch after every single ride. I have to. I tend to warm up on the bike, so first 5 or 10 miles, take it easy, and that should be okay, but I need to stretch when I get off the bike because I am sinewy in my sort of late 30s, really just like stiffening up. It's such a millennial, like late 30s thing, but my lower back is absolutely shot. I think it's because I keep picking up my daughter all the time as well without bending my knees, and it's really doing some damage. So I need to, yeah, eat lunch and stretch. So simple, but it makes such a big difference in my life. But yeah, there we go. Bit weird, I suppose, and most of you probably don't care. But yeah, anyway, let me know what your New Year's resolutions are because yeah, I'll be interested to hear actually. Anyway, enough of that. I'll see you next time. Ciao.